Commander Xal'barr drummed his 7 digits against the command console, each tap sending tiny ripples of blue light across the holographic display. The ship's engines hummed at a frequency that would have been imperceptible to most species, but to a Xantaran like himself, it sounded like a chorus of anxious whispers. "Are we absolutely certain the cloaking shield will hold?" he asked, not bothering to look up at his second-in-command. "Because I'm not particularly eager to become the punchline of every joke at Galactic Collective headquarters for the next 3 centuries. Lieutenant Xal'barr snorted, her nasal ridges flaring with that distinctive orange glow that always signaled her amusement. "Worried about your spotless record, Commander? Or just having second thoughts about breaking approximately 73 major protocols?" 74, actually, chimed in Officer Drex, their navigation specialist, who had the unfortunate habit of taking everything literally. "We're also violating subsection 12B of the non-intervention charter by—" "Thank you, Drex." Xal'barr cut him off with a wave of his hand. "Your encyclopedic knowledge of regulations we're breaking is, as always, tremendously helpful." The small bridge fell silent as Earth came into view through the main viewport. Beautiful. Dangerous. Absolutely forbidden. The blue-green planet hung in the void like a jewel, clouds swirling across its surface in hypnotic patterns. "The Collective has been wrong before," Xal'barr said quietly, more to himself than his crew. "They said the Proxians were mindless destroyers too, and now they're our leading mathematicians." Chief Science Officer Rezé looked up from her station, her crystalline eyes shifting through a rainbow of colors as they adjusted to the changing light. "With respect, Commander, the Proxians didn't have 57 different religions dedicated to hunting alien life forms, or reality programs about alien invasions, or those, what are they called, conspiracy theorists? Humanity's just curious," Xal'barr argued, "and maybe a little paranoid. But declaring an entire species off limits based on intercepted entertainment broadcasts, that's not science. That's superstition." Xal'barr hadn't reached his position by playing it safe. 20 stellar cycles of pushing boundaries, asking uncomfortable questions, and occasionally stepping over the line had earned him both admirers and critics throughout the Collective. This mission, however, was different. This wasn't just bending rules. This was snapping them in half, setting them on fire, and launching the ashes into a black hole. "Final approach vector locked," Drex announced. "Atmospheric entry in 3 minutes. Cloaking shield at maximum capacity," added Xal'barr. "We'll be completely invisible to their primitive scanning systems." Xal'barr nodded, trying to ignore the fluttering sensation in his secondary stomach. "Remember the mission parameters. Observe only. No contact. Minimal environmental disruption. We get our readings, confirm or deny the Collective's assumptions about human development, and we're gone before anyone notices." The ship began to shudder as they hit the upper atmosphere, friction causing the hull to glow slightly despite their heat shields. "Commander?" Reznav's voice had taken on a higher pitch. "I'm detecting some unusual electromagnetic patterns in their atmosphere. Nothing in our databases matches." A sudden jolt threw Xal'barr forward against his restraints. Warning lights flashed across every console as alarms began to wail. "Status report," he shouted over the noise. "Cloaking shield is failing." Xal'barr's fingers flew across her console. "Something in their atmosphere is interfering with our systems." Drex's eyes widened as he stared at his displays. "Commander, we're visible to anyone looking up." A new alarm joined the cacophony, this one even more urgent. "Propulsion system compromised," Rezné called out, her voice steady despite the panic evident in her rapidly color-shifting eyes. "We're losing altitude control." Xal'barr gripped his command chair as the ship lurched again. "The emergency landing protocols, now." As the craft plummeted toward the surface, breaking every rule of first contact with each passing second, Xal'barr had one singular, crystal-clear thought. The Collective was going to have his hide mounted on the wall of the Grand Assembly Hall. And that was assuming the humans didn't get to him first. The Zentaran research vessel didn't so much land as it did surrender to gravity with theatrical flair. It carved a spectacular trench through 3 cornfields before coming to rest at the edge of Millerville, population 2,763, current status, is celebrating their 150th annual harvest festival with unexpected extraterrestrial guests. Damage assessment? Xal'barr groaned, peeling himself off the floor where he'd been thrown during their less-than-graceful touchdown. Resnay was already running diagnostics, her fingers dancing across multiple screens. Primary propulsion, offline. Secondary propulsion, offline. Tertiary backup systems, I didn't even know we had those, but they're definitely offline too. Communications? He asked, dreading the answer. About as functional as your career will be when the collective finds out about this, Xal'barr replied, attempting to restart her console for the 3rd time. Drex, somehow still strapped into his chair, pointed at the view screen. Commander, I believe we have a more immediate concern. The screen showed dozens of humans surrounding their ship, many holding devices pointed at them, others consuming what appeared to be food on sticks. None seemed particularly terrified by the smoking alien spacecraft that had just plowed through their farmland. They don't appear to be mobilizing their military, Xal'barr observed cautiously. Perhaps their response units haven't arrived yet, Resnay suggested. A loud banging came from the hull. Someone was knocking. "Hello in there?" came a muffled voice. That was some entrance. "The parade's not for another hour, but we're happy to squeeze you in early." The 4 aliens exchanged bewildered looks. "They think we're part of their celebration," Drex whispered, his voice a mixture of relief and confusion. Xal'barr straightened his uniform. "This is salvageable. We enact Emergency Protocol 17B, minimal contact, information gathering, and swift departure." "With what ship?" Xal'barr gestured around the damaged bridge. "Details," Xal'barr waved dismissively. "First, we must establish formal diplomatic relations to ensure our safety while repairs are made." "Commander, the Collective specifically forbids?" "The Collective isn't stranded on a supposedly hostile planet with a broken ship, are they?" Xal'barr cut in. "Now, help me prepare for humanity's first official extraterrestrial greeting." 20 minutes later, after a heated debate about proper diplomatic attire and whether they should bring weapons, vetoed by Xal'barr, who pointed out that they hadn't brought any anyway, the crew stood before their ship's exit hatch. "Remember your training?" Xal'barr said solemnly. "We represent the entirety of galactic civilization." "We represent the entirety of court-martialed officers, more likely," muttered Xal'barr. The hatch opened with a dramatic hiss, revealing 4 aliens to the gathered crowd. A moment of hushed silence fell over the humans. Xal'barr stepped forward, raised all 7 fingers in the universal gesture of peace, and began the carefully rehearsed speech he'd prepared for this historic moment. "People of Earth, I am Commander Xal'barr of the Galactic Collective Research Division. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and mutual understanding between our civilizations." The woman in the front row leaned toward her friend. "The costumes get better every year. Look at those tentacles. Do you think they're animatronic?" "Definitely CGI," her friend replied, already uploading a video to her social media account. "Hey alien dudes, do the take me to your leader thing." Xal'barr paused, his grand speech derailed. "I what?" A teenage boy pushed to the front. "These are definitely the guys from AlienCon. The makeup is sick. Can I get a selfie?" Before Xal'barr could respond, the boy had pulled him into frame and snapped several photos. The flash temporarily blinded the commander's sensitive eyes. "We are not performers," Resnay attempted to clarify, stepping forward. "We are actual extraterrestrial beings who have." Yeah, that's what they all say," laughed an older man wearing a t-shirt with a flying saucer on it. Stay in character, that's the spirit. Hey everybody, the alien contest winners want to say hello. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Someone handed Drex a corn dog. What is this substance? He whispered to Pax Laura, cautiously sniffing the food item. Unknown. Probably toxic. Don't consume it, she warned. Drex took a bite anyway. His eyes widened, all 4 pupils dilating simultaneously. This is incredible. A middle-aged woman in a floral dress approached Xal'barr. You folks are just in time for the parade. We'll put you right up front with the mayor. The kids are going to love those costumes. Listen carefully, Xal'barr tried again, his voice taking on the authoritative tone that made junior officers throughout the sector quake. We are not in costume. We are actual visitors from another world. This is first contact between our species. The crowd roared with laughter. Someone shouted, classic alien bit. Do the probe joke next. Pax Laura leaned close to her commander. Sir, they genuinely don't believe we're real. I noticed, Xal'barr replied dryly. Somehow, the species we were warned would react with violent hysteria to our existence is instead taking selfies with us. In the distance, sirens wailed. Not military response units as they'd feared, but rather the local sheriff coming to investigate reports of property damage to Farmer Johnson's cornfields. Perhaps we should retreat to the ship until we better understand the situation? Suggested Rezi, looking nervously at the growing crowd, most of whom were now recording them with their devices. Negative, replied Xal'barr, watching as Drex accepted a second corn dog from a smiling child. Our cover story appears to be working. They think we're entertainers in costumes. As long as they don't realize we're genuine aliens, we have time to assess our situation. A young woman with pink hair pushed through the crowd, eyeing their damaged ship with more scrutiny than the others. That's some impressive engineering for a convention prop, she said, not to them, but to herself. Those aren't any joints or seams I recognize. Xal'barr felt a twinge of unease as she met his gaze with narrowed eyes. Unlike the others, she didn't seem to be buying the costume explanation. For now, he said quietly to his crew, we play along with their assumption. Participate in their parade. Gather information. And find somewhere to hide while we repair our ship. And if someone realizes we're not in costume? Asked Pax Laura. Xal'barr watched as the sheriff's car pulled up and an overweight man in a uniform climbed out, already looking annoyed at having his festival day interrupted. Let's hope the collective's assessment of humanity's violent tendencies was as inaccurate as their fashion sense appears to be, he replied, forcing a smile as the mayor approached with a festival ribbon she clearly intended to drape around his neck. The good news, Rezene announced after 3 hours of diagnostic scans, is that we're not dead. Xal'barr looked up from the festival map he'd been studying. The humans had helpfully provided them with backstage passes after their impromptu parade appearance. I'm sensing there's bad news to follow. The bad news? She continued, her crystalline eyes dimming to a concerned indigo, is practically everything else. Earth's magnetic field has unique properties our research didn't account for. It's completely fried our navigation systems, communication array, and most of our technology that relies on quantum entanglement. So, to summarize, Pax Laura said from where she was attempting to repair a circuit panel, we can't fly away, we can't call for help, and we can't even send a distress signal to warn the collective not to send anyone else. Precisely, Res-Na confirmed. Fantastic, Xal'barr muttered. Any more wonderful developments to report? Drex raised his hand as if in a classroom. I've analyzed our remaining functional systems. The atmospheric converter is working, so we won't suffocate. Food synthesizers are offline, but... He held up another corn dog, his 4th since arriving. Local sustenance appears compatible with our digestive systems. We need to blend in, Xal'barr decided, pacing the limited space of their damaged bridge. If we remain performers in costumes, we'll attract too much attention. We need human disguises while we repair the ship. 3 hours later, the crew stood before their commander in what they believed were convincing human outfits, cobbled together from festival souvenir shops and a clothing store Pax Laura had discovered on the town's main street. "How do I look?" asked Drex, who had chosen a Hawaiian shirt stretched tightly over his bulbous torso, paired with denim shorts that revealed far too much of his spindly, double-jointed legs. He'd topped the ensemble with a baseball cap emblazoned with "I believe" and a crude flying saucer. "Like someone trying very hard not to look like an alien," Xal'barr replied flatly. Pax Laura had fared better, opting for a flowing sundress that concealed most of her non-human features, though nothing could be done about her orange-tinged skin or the ridges along her hairless scalp. She'd attempted to solve this with an enormous floppy sun hat and excessive amounts of makeup purchased after a confusing exchange with a bewildered cosmetics salesperson. "The makeup assistant said this shade would bring out my eyes," she explained, her face now a disturbing patchwork of human skin tones that somehow made her look more alien than before. Res Na had taken a different approach, wrapping herself in multiple scarves, sunglasses, and what appeared to be a full-body poncho. "I told the shop owner I was extremely sensitive to sunlight," she explained from somewhere within her fabric cocoon. She assumed I had a medical condition and was very sympathetic. Xal'barr himself had opted for simplicity: jeans, a button-up shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low to shadow his distinctly non-human features. He'd also wrapped his 7-fingered hands in bandages, explaining to curious onlookers that he'd suffered a cooking accident. The explanation seemed to satisfy most humans, who would then immediately launch into stories of their own kitchen mishaps. "Right," Xal'barr said, surveying his crew with what humans might recognize as the universal expression of a manager losing his will to live. "Remember your cover stories. We're a performance troupe from Where Did We Decide?" "Canada," supplied Drex helpfully. "Humans seem to know very little about Canadians except that they're polite and say sorry frequently." "Canada it is. We're taking a break from our alien-themed show to enjoy small-town America. We're staying in our RV." He pointed to their damaged ship, now hastily covered with a tarp and parked behind the local diner while we tour the country. "And if anyone asks about our odd appearances?" Res Na inquired. "Experimental cosmetic surgery," Pax Laura suggested. "I saw a television program about it while studying the communications device in our motel room." Their first venture into town as disguised humans went about as smoothly as their landing. Drex kept forgetting to walk on only 2 legs instead of using all 4 when he thought no one was looking. Res Na's poncho caught on a fire hydrant, nearly strangling her. Pax Laura terrified a child by smiling too widely, revealing her triple row of teeth she'd forgotten to conceal. Xal'barr, trying to purchase supplies at the hardware store. He found himself in a 30-minute conversation about the weather with the elderly shopkeeper who seemed determined to establish a deep personal connection before selling him a single screwdriver. So friendly, he complained later as they regrouped in their ship. The collective said humans were paranoid isolationists. "These people won't stop talking to us." "The woman at the diner insisted I take extra pie because I looked too skinny," Res Na reported, sounding bewildered as she produced a container of blue-filled pastry. "Then she pinched my cheek. Is this a dominance ritual?" "The man at the gas station invited me to something called a tailgate party next weekend," added Drex. "When I asked what we would be doing to the tails, or which gates were involved, he just laughed and gave me this." He held up a can of beer. He called it a brewski and said I looked like I could crush a few cold ones. Pax Laura, who had been monitoring the local information networks via a device called an iPhone she'd purchased, looked up with concern. "Commander, I think we have a problem. I've been checking these social media platforms. Videos of our arrival are spreading. Most comments assume we're promoting a movie or television show, but some are asking questions we don't want asked. Xal'barr sighed, removing his hat to massage his throbbing cranial ridges. How long until the ship is operational? Best case scenario? 2 Earth weeks, Resine answered. And that's assuming we can find compatible materials for repairs. 2 weeks of this, Xal'barr gestured vaguely toward the town visible through their viewport. 2 weeks of pretending to be humans, making small talk about precipitation, eating corn dogs, and hoping no one realizes we're the first aliens to make contact with Earth. Look on the bright side, Drex suggested cheerfully, already opening his beer can. At least they aren't dissecting us. The collective was wrong about humans. They're not dangerous at all. They're just exhausting. Xal'barr finished for him, as the sound of another festival band began playing nearby. Relentlessly, unnervingly exhausting. Taylor Reeves had been Millerville's head mechanic for nearly a decade, ever since taking over her father's garage at 23. She'd fixed everything from vintage tractors to the mayor's ridiculous imported sports car. But the machine currently hidden behind Earl's diner. That was definitely a first. "You've got a coolant leak there," she said casually, pointing to the underside of what was very obviously not an RV. Xal'barr, caught in the act of attempting to extract a crucial component from beneath the ship, froze. "I don't know what you're talking about." "This is a recreational vehicle, for recreation. Very normal human recreation." "Aha," Taylor nodded, taking a bite from her apple. "And I'm the Queen of England. That's a plasma conduit, not a coolant line. Your heat shields are scorched in a non-atmospheric entry pattern, and unless RVs have started using quantum crystalline alloys for their structural components, I'm pretty sure you're not from around here." She paused, then added with a smirk, "Like really not from around here." Xal'barr's hand instinctively moved toward the molecular disruptor at his belt, then remembered they had no weapons. "How did you?" "Aerospace engineering dropout," she explained, tossing the apple core aside. "Plus, I was the one who posted those videos of you guys online. We've been watching you for days. Your disguises are, let's just say, Halloween comes early to Millerville this year." "Are the authorities coming?" Xal'barr glanced nervously toward the road. Taylor laughed. "If I wanted to report you, the government would have been swarming this place days ago. No, I've got a different proposal." She leaned against the ship, remarkably unafraid. "You need parts you can't get, tools you don't have. It's a place to work that isn't behind a diner where the cook dumps grease that's corroding your landing gear. I have a garage, tools, and mechanical knowledge. Plus, a barn on my property where you could hide this thing properly." Xal'barr narrowed his eyes. "And what do you want in exchange?" "Knowledge," she replied simply. "I want to know how this works." She tapped the ship's hull. "I want to understand your technology. I dropped out of MIT because they said my theories on quantum propulsion were unrealistic. Turns out I was right." "Absolutely not," Xal'barr said immediately. "Sharing advanced technology with pre-spacefaring species violates," says the alien who crashed his spaceship during an illegal visit, Taylor interrupted. "Look, I'm not asking for weapons. I don't want to conquer the galaxy. I just want to know how you get from point A to point B without taking a century. Help me understand the science, I'll help you fix your ship. Deal?" "Deal?" Before Xal'barr could respond, Drex emerged from the ship's hatch, wearing only his alien undergarments and a cowboy hat. "Commander, I've been monitoring Earth television and I've made a startling discovery about human mating rituals. They have these programs called reality shows where—" He stopped, noticing Taylor. "Oh! Hello, human person. I am definitely not discussing alien observations of your species. I am Canadian." Taylor raised an eyebrow at Xal'barr. "Your crew could use some help with blending in, too." Xal'barr sighed deeply. "We accept your offer." The alliance with Taylor quickly proved both invaluable and incredibly complicated. No, 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 Taylor shouted, diving across her garage to stop Res NA from connecting two incompatible power sources. Earth electricity, and whatever powers your doohickey don't mix. You'll blow up half the county. Apologies, Res NA said, not for the first time that day. Your primitive energy containment systems are confusingly simple. Taylor rolled her eyes. My primitive systems don't randomly catch fire, unlike someone's quantum probability calculator. It didn't catch fire, Resnay corrected primly. It simply expressed its uncertainty principle in a thermally demonstrative manner. Meanwhile, in another corner of the barn where they'd relocated the ship, Pax Laura was attempting to explain the concept of human currency to Drex, who remained baffled by the entire economic system. So these pieces of paper have value because everyone agrees they do? He asked, examining a $20 bill. But they're not backed by resources, or computational power, or life extension credits? Apparently not, Pax Laura confirmed. And different paper has different values based on the number printed on it, not the quality or size of the paper itself. Madness, Drex declared, handing the money to Taylor. This should cover the pizza you're acquiring for us. He had given her $300 for a $30 pizza order. Yeah, no, Taylor said, returning most of the money. We talked about this. You can't just flash cash around like that. People will ask questions. Questions are good, Drex insisted. I have many about human digestion. After consuming 14 of your tacos yesterday, I experienced... And that's enough of that conversation, Xal'barr interrupted, emerging from beneath the ship with a singed uniform and a haunted expression. Taylor, I've recalibrated the temporal stabilizers using your what was it called? Microwave oven, she supplied. Right. Surprisingly effective if dangerously unshielded. He brushed soot from his sleeves. How's the hull repair coming along? I've reinforced it with a titanium alloy I developed, Taylor said, pride evident in her voice. Not as good as your original material, but it should hold for atmospheric exit. Their work was interrupted by the sound of a vehicle approaching. Taylor peered through the barn window and cursed. It's Sheriff Briggs. Quick, everyone look human. The aliens scrambled, with varying degrees of success. Drex hastily shoved his secondary arms into his shirt, creating an unnaturally lumpy torso. Res N.A. pulled her hood lower, while Pax Laura frantically tried to apply more makeup to cover her orange skin, mostly just making it worse. Xal'barr grabbed a wrench and tried to look casual, leaning against the tarp-covered ship in what he assumed was a relaxed human posture. It wasn't. The barn door swung open, and Sheriff Briggs stepped in, removing his sunglasses. Taylor, got reports of strange lights coming from your property last night. Everything okay out here? Just fine, Sheriff, Taylor replied smoothly. Working on a special project with my friends from Canada. Film industry stuff. Very hush-hush. The sheriff's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the aliens. Aha. And what's under that tarp? Prototype, Taylor said quickly, for a sci-fi movie. But can't really show it off yet. NDAs and all that. Sheriff Briggs approached Drex, who was sweating profusely, an unfortunate reaction that in his species produced bright blue droplets. You feeling all right, son? You're looking a little blue. Sorry. Drex squeaked, his voice an octave higher than usual. Allergies. To American oxygen. Very different from Canadian oxygen. Much more freedom-filled. The sheriff stared at him for a long moment before turning to Xal'barr. And what's your role in this production, Ismar? Smith, Xal'barr supplied, having learned it was Earth's most common surname. John Smith. I'm the key grip. Key grip, the sheriff repeated flatly. Yes, Xal'barr nodded enthusiastically. I grip keys. Very important in filmmaking. He means he's the director, Taylor interjected. In Canadian film terminology. Different up there. The sheriff looked unconvinced but seemed unwilling to pursue it further. Well, keep the noise down. And whatever you're doing that's lighting up the sky at night, tone it down. Mrs. Henderson thinks you're summoning demons. After he left, the aliens collectively exhaled. That was close, Taylor said. But seriously, I grip keys? We need to work on your cover stories. And quickly, Pax Laura added, checking her datapad, I've been monitoring their information networks. Our videos have gone viral, as humans say. Someone named Conspiracy Keith is organizing a group to investigate Millerville this weekend. Xal'barr looked to Taylor. How much longer until the ship is operational? She wiped grease from her hands onto her already stained jeans. At this rate? 4 more days? Minimum? Think you can keep your crew from exposing yourselves as aliens until then? Xal'barr watched as Drex, believing himself unobserved, used all 4 arms to open a bag of chips while simultaneously texting on his phone and adjusting the TV antenna. No, he admitted. No, I really don't. Day 7 of their unplanned Earth vacation brought troubling developments that had nothing to do with their ship repairs. Commander, we have a situation, Res-Ina announced during their morning status meeting in Taylor's barn. She'd taken to wearing flannel shirts and overalls borrowed from Taylor, a far cry from her formal science uniform. Even more alarming, she'd started wearing her hair, or rather, her cranial sensory filaments in what humans called a ponytail. What now? Xal'barr asked, not looking up from his tablet where he was streaming his 3rd consecutive episode of a baking competition show. If Drex has discovered another all-you-can-eat buffet, the answer is no. It's not that, Resnay said, though she glanced nervously at Drex, who was currently devouring his 5th Pop-Tart of the morning. It's about our biochemistry. I've been running tests, and we're changing. That got Xal'Barr's attention. He reluctantly paused the show just as a contestant was facing a sponge cake crisis. Changing how? Our neurochemistry is adapting to Earth's environment at an alarming rate, Resnay explained, bringing up a holographic display of their brain scans. See these regions? They're showing increased activity in areas associated with emotional processing, individual preference, and, she paused dramatically, personality development. That's impossible, Pax Laura scoffed, looking up from where she was painting her newly growing fingernails a bright shade of pink. Zenterans evolved beyond individualistic traits centuries ago. Our species functions on collective consciousness and… She trailed off, suddenly aware of what she was doing. Horrified, she put down the nail polish. Oh no. Precisely, Resnay said grimly. We're developing unique preferences and personal tastes, individuality. But how? Xal'Barr demanded. And why? Earth's biosphere has unique properties, Resnay theorized. Something in the air, water, or food is stimulating dormant neural pathways in our brains. Pathways our species evolved beyond needing eons ago. Drex, mouth full of Pop-Tart, raised his hand. Is that why I cried during that commercial about the lonely puppy finding a home? Because I've never cried before. Ever. It was terrifying. And strangely satisfying. Yes, Resnay confirmed. And it's why Pax Laura has started collecting decorative spoons from each diner we visit. They're not just spoons, Pax Laura defended herself. Each one tells a story. Xal'Barr rubbed his temples, a gesture he'd unconsciously adopted from Taylor. So you're saying Earth is contaminating us? Making us more like humans? In a manner of speaking, Resnay nodded. Our biochemistry is adapting to this environment in ways I can't fully explain. The longer we stay, the more pronounced the effect becomes. I fail to see the problem, Drex said, unwrapping another Pop-Tart. So we develop personalities. Big deal. The collective has been trying to stamp those out for generations anyway. The problem, Xal'Barr said sharply, is that we are becoming compromised. Our mission. What mission? Pax Laura interrupted. We crashed. We broke protocol. There is no mission anymore, just survival. Xal'barr was about to reprimand her for the outburst when he realized he was tapping his foot in rhythm to the country music playing on Taylor's radio. Music he'd initially described as primitive auditory torture but now found himself humming when alone. He'd even downloaded several playlists to his personal device. "What's our time frame?" he asked Resonate. "Hard to say. The changes seem to accelerate over time. Another week, and we might find ourselves significantly altered." "We need to leave as soon as possible," Xal'barr decided. "Taylor says the ship will be ready in 3 days. Until then, minimize consumption of Earth food, media, and social interaction." "But Taylor's taking me to something called a line dancing night at the Rusty Nail tomorrow," Drex protested. "She says I have natural rhythm for someone with 4 legs. And see? And move." "Absolutely not," Xal'barr ordered. "No more unnecessary human contact." At that moment, Taylor entered the barn carrying trays of food. "Lunchtime, space cadets. Made you all my mom's famous meatloaf. And Xal'barr, I got that movie you wanted. The one about the robots in disguise?" Xal'barr felt his crew's judging eyes on him as he attempted to look disinterested. "It's research. To understand Earth culture." Pax Laura smirked. "Just like how those human country ballads you've been listening to are research. They tell emotionally resonant stories about human existence." Xal'barr defended himself. "The one about the man whose vehicle ceases functioning, causing his romantic partner to leave him, then his canine companion perishes its anthropological gold." Resonate shook her head. "Commander, you cried for an hour." "I did not cry," Xal'barr insisted, his voice rising an octave. "I experienced a temporary ocular fluid release related to atmospheric irritants." Taylor, listening to this exchange, set down the food trays. "Wait, are you guys okay? You seem weirder than usual. And for 7-fingered aliens, that's saying something." Xal'barr hesitated, then decided Taylor deserved the truth. "Earth is changing us. Something in your environment is affecting our neurochemistry, making us more individual, more emotional, more human," Taylor said, understanding immediately. "Precisely," Resonate confirmed. "Which is problematic since we're supposed to be emotionally detached, logical beings serving the greater collective good. Not whatever this is." She gestured to Drex, who was now wearing a cowboy hat and had somehow acquired a belt buckle larger than his head. Taylor considered this. "Is it dangerous? Physically, I mean." "No," Resonate admitted. "But it's uncomfortable. We're experiencing emotions our species hasn't felt in generations." "Like what?" Taylor asked. "Nostalgia," said Pax Laura. "I've never missed anything before. Now I find myself missing my home while simultaneously feeling fond of this place. It's contradictory and inefficient." "Joy," Drex added, looking almost embarrassed. "Real joy, not just satisfaction at completing a task efficiently. Yesterday I watched a butterfly for 20 minutes. Just watched it. No data collection, no purpose. It was beautiful." "Here," Resonate said quietly. "Not rational concern about survival, but existential fear about who I am becoming." There was a long silence before Xal'barr spoke. "Attachment," he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. "I find myself caring. About people, individuals. It's deeply unprofessional." Taylor looked around at the aliens, seeing their genuine distress. "You know, from where I'm standing, this doesn't sound like contamination. It sounds like growth." "You wouldn't understand," Xal'barr said. "Your species never evolved beyond these limitations." "Limitations?" Taylor raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call having a personality? Caring about things? Enjoying music and food and life?" "The collective teaches that such individualistic traits led to conflict and inefficiency in our early development," Pax Laura explained. "We evolved beyond them for the greater good." Sounds to me like you evolved into being boring, Taylor remarked. No offense. Drex snorted, then tried to cover it with a cough when Xal'barr glared at him. Are we still fixing the ship? Taylor asked after a moment. Of course, Xal'barr said firmly. We don't belong here. And based on these developments, the sooner we leave, the better. But later that night, after the others had gone to sleep, Xal'barr found himself sitting on the roof of Taylor's barn, gazing at Earth's moon so different from the 3 moons of his homeworld with a strange ache in his chest. He'd secretly downloaded more country music to his personal device and was listening to a particularly emotional song about a man returning to his small hometown. He didn't notice he was crying until Taylor climbed up and silently handed him a tissue. It's just so beautiful, he tried to explain, gesturing vaguely at the night sky, the distant lights of Millerville, the fireflies blinking in the fields. Yeah, Taylor agreed, sitting beside him. It is. I'm compromised, Xal'barr admitted. A commander should never allow themselves to become emotionally involved in a mission. Taylor shrugged. Seems to me like emotions are what make life worth living in the first place. Xal'barr had no response to that. It was a concept so foreign to everything he'd been taught that he couldn't even argue against it. Instead, they sat in silence, watching the stars, the same stars that had always been there, but somehow to Xal'barr they had never looked quite so magnificent before. They were 3 days from departure when the proximity alerts blared throughout the partially repaired ship. Xal'barr bolted from beneath the console he'd been rewiring and rushed to the scanner station. Please tell me that's just another Earth satellite, he said, already knowing it wasn't. Resnay's fingers flew across the controls, her expression growing increasingly grim, being negative. It's a collective enforcement vessel. Delta class. Delta class? Paxlora whispered, the color draining from her orange-tinted face. They send those for planetary quarantine operations. They've found us, Xal'barr stated the obvious, a strange tightness forming in his chest, another new sensation he hadn't experienced before Earth. Anxiety, Taylor had called it. How long until they're in range? 2 hours, 17 minutes, Res-Na calculated. They're being cautious, maintaining high orbit, probably scanning for our biosignatures. Drex, who'd been outside helping Taylor acquire more parts, burst through the ship's hatch. Commander? I just saw. We know, Xal'barr cut him off. Collective enforcement has arrived. We're saved, Drex exclaimed, then caught himself as he noticed no one else was celebrating. Aren't we? Think about it, Paxlora said quietly. He violated direct orders, crashed on a prohibited planet, made contact with the native species. And now she gestured to her painted nails and the Earth clothing they all wore. We're compromised. Drex's face fell. They're not here to rescue us. No, Xal'barr agreed. Standard protocol for this situation is clear. Eliminate evidence of contact. Sterilize the contamination zone. Sterilize? Taylor asked from the doorway, having followed Drex inside. What does that mean? The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. It means, Xal'barr finally said, they will eradicate all potential witnesses to our presence. The town, everyone in it, possibly the surrounding area, anything to ensure knowledge of our existence doesn't spread. Taylor stared at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, she collapsed into the nearest chair. You're serious? Your people would wipe out an entire town over this? The collective maintains order through strict protocols, Res-Na explained, not meeting Taylor's eyes. First contact scenarios are meticulously planned over centuries. Unauthorized contact is considered an existential threat to both species involved. That's insane, Taylor said flatly. That's how we've maintained galactic peace for millennia, Paxlora countered, though her voice lacked conviction. By obliterating anyone who accidentally learns about you? Taylor stood, anger replacing shock. These are people we're talking about. Mrs. Wilson, who gives out the best Halloween candy. Old Pete, who plays chess in the park. Kids, families, an entire community. We understand that, Xal'barr said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. A week ago, he would have accepted collateral damage as an unfortunate necessity. Now, the thought of Millerville being destroyed made him physically ill. The communications array is partially functional, Reze reported. We're receiving a transmission from the enforcement vessel. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the bridge. Captain Vril Knox of the Collective Enforcement Division stood rigidly at attention, his uniform pristine, his expression as emotionless as all Zentarans were supposed to be. Commander Xal'barr, he began without preamble. You and your crew have violated Protocol 5721B regarding prohibited planetary contact. Sensors confirm widespread contamination of the local population. The Collective has authorized immediate sterilization of the affected zone to prevent further spread. You are ordered to report to the designated extraction point for quarantine processing in exactly 2 hours. Enforcement teams will handle the rest. The transmission ended before Xal'barr could respond. Quarantine processing, Drex repeated softly. They're going to wipe our memories, aren't they? Standard procedure, Pax Laura confirmed. They'll extract any useful data from our neural pathways, then reset us to pre-mission cognitive states. Taylor looked horrified. They can erase your memories? Everything from the moment we decided to visit Earth, Reze explained. It's considered a mercy compared to the alternative. Which is? Taylor asked. Permanent neural restructuring, Xal'barr said grimly. Essentially, execution without death. Our bodies would live on, but we'd be empty. A heavy silence fell over the ship. We have to warn everyone, Taylor finally said, already pulling out her phone. Evacuate the town. No one would believe you, Pax Laura pointed out. And even if they did, where would they go? The enforcement vessel can track human biosignatures now that they've identified the contamination pattern. So we just let them die? Taylor's voice cracked. Let them kill everyone I've known my entire life? My friends? My family? Xal'barr stared at the console, a war raging within him. Everything he'd been taught, every principle he'd sworn to uphold, told him the Collective was right. Earth was dangerous not because humans were violent, but because they made you feel. They made you care. They made you question whether efficiency and protocol were more important than joy and connection. But another voice had been growing steadily louder during their time on Earth, a voice that sounded suspiciously like his own, but different, more distinct, more individual. No, he said finally, looking up at his crew. We're not going to let that happen. Commander? Reze's eyes widened. Are you suggesting we disobey direct orders from the Collective? I'm suggesting we do what's right, Xal'barr replied, surprised by the strength in his voice. The Collective is wrong about Earth, wrong about humans. We've seen it firsthand. They're not a threat. They're just different. They live with emotions we've forgotten how to feel. They embrace individuality we've been taught to suppress. Defying the Collective is treason, Pax Laura reminded him, though she didn't sound opposed to the idea. So is destroying an innocent town, Xal'barr countered. We created this situation. We broke protocol. These people shouldn't die for our mistake. What exactly are you proposing? Reze asked, her scientific mind already calculating possibilities. Xal'barr turned to Taylor. How close are we to having a functional ship? The navigation system still needs work, but life support, propulsion, and basic communication are operational, she reported. It could fly, but I wouldn't trust it for long-distance space travel yet. It doesn't need to go far, Xal'barr said, a plan forming. just far enough to draw the enforcement vessel away from Earth. And then what? Drex asked nervously. Then we negotiate, Xal'barr said. We present our findings. Show them that humans aren't the primitive threat they believe. With all due respect, Commander, Pax-Lora said, the Collective doesn't negotiate with rule breakers. They do when the rule breakers have valuable data, Xal'barr countered. And we have something they've never had before, first-hand experience with humans. He glanced at each of his crew members in turn, seeing the same conflict he felt reflected in their eyes. They'd changed, all of them. Earth had awakened something long dormant in their species, the ability to question, to feel, to choose their own path. I won't order any of you to join me, he said quietly. This is treason, and the consequences could be severe. If you wish to report to the extraction point as ordered, I won't stop you. Drex was the first to step forward. With respect, Commander, I've discovered 43 different varieties of breakfast cereal on this planet. I'm not leaving until I've tried at least 30 more. Pax-Lora sighed dramatically. Someone needs to make sure you don't get yourselves killed. Might as well be me. The scientific data we've gathered is too valuable to lose, Res-Na added practically, though a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. I'm in. Taylor looked around at the aliens, her aliens, as she'd come to think of them, and felt a surge of pride. Well then, she said, clapping her hands together, we've got less than 2 hours to save the world. Let's get to work. As the others rushed to prepare the ship, Xal'barr lingered for a moment, staring at his reflection in one of the console screens. He barely recognized himself, not just the Earth clothes or the subtle physical changes from the planet's environment, but something deeper. His eyes held an expression that would have been alien to him just days ago. It looked remarkably like hope. Xal'barr had broken plenty of rules in his career, but this was his first genuine act of treason. Oddly enough, it felt strangely liberating. Approaching the enforcement vessel, Drex announced, his voice tense as he piloted their hastily repaired ship toward the looming collective warship. They're scanning us. One? Right on schedule, Xal'barr replied, checking the small device strapped to his wrist. Taylor, status? Taylor's voice came through the communication system from back in her barn, where she'd stayed behind to coordinate the ground operation. Signal booster is online. The moment you transmit, it'll amplify to reach collective headquarters directly. And the town? Xal'barr asked. Sheriff Briggs thinks I'm crazy, but he's evacuating everyone to the old mine tunnels outside town, just in case. They're deep enough to mask biosignatures. Xal'barr nodded, relieved. Their plan was absurdly simple, which meant it had about 1,000 ways to fail spectacularly. Approach the enforcement vessel under the guise of complying with orders, get close enough to deploy the virus Res-Na had coded to temporarily disable their weapons systems, then broadcast their evidence directly to collective leadership, bypassing Captain Vril Nox entirely. Incoming transmission, Pax-Lora reported. Captain Vril Nox's stern face appeared on screen. Commander Xal'barr, you're early for extraction. Explain. Captain, Xal'barr greeted with a formal salute. We've completed our preparations and are ready for processing. Request permission to dock. The captain's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Granted. Proceed to Hangar 3. Decontamination protocols will begin immediately upon arrival. The transmission ended. He doesn't trust us, Res-Na observed. Would you? Xal'barr asked wryly. Pax-Lora, is the package ready? She patted the small device beside her console. Iris is primed. The moment we're within range, their weapons, shields, and engines will go offline for exactly 7 minutes. And our evidence package? He asked Res-Na. She held up a data crystal pulsing with light. All our logs, scans, and personal testimonials, plus Taylor's documentary footage showing human culture, achievements, and behavior. I've included a comprehensive neurological study of our own transformations as well. Excellent. Xal'barr took a deep breath. Drex, take us in, slow and steady. The tiny research vessel approached the massive enforcement ship, looking like a mosquito beside an elephant. Hangar 3 loomed ahead, its force field shimmering like oil on water. Within virus range in 3, 2, 1, Pax Laura counted down, then pressed the activation sequence. Deploying now. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then alarms began blaring from the enforcement vessel. The hangar force field flickered and died. The massive ship's external lights dimmed as emergency power kicked in. Virus successful. Pax Laura reported, pumping her fist in a very UN Zentaran, very human gesture of triumph. Comms are open, Res AA confirmed, broadcasting on all collective frequencies now. Xal'barr stepped forward, facing the communication array. For the second time since arriving on Earth, he prepared to deliver a speech that would change everything, hopefully with better results than his first attempt. Attention, Galactic Collective High Command. This is Commander Xal'barr of Research Vessel Quantum Horizon. I am transmitting evidence of critical importance regarding species 7291, designation humans. He paused, acutely aware this transmission would end his career, at minimum. The collective's assessment of humanity is fundamentally flawed. They are not the primitive threat our intelligence suggested. They are complex, creative beings with remarkable capacity for growth, adaptation, and compassion. Behind him, Res NA began transmitting their evidence package, hundreds of hours of data compressed into a burst transmission. During our admittedly unauthorized study, we've documented evidence that contradicts every negative assumption about this species. They create art that serves no purpose except to inspire emotion. They form communities based not just on practical necessity but on genuine care for one another. They value individual thought while still functioning collectively. On the enforcement vessel, technicians would be frantically working to regain control of their systems. Xal'barr needed to finish before they succeeded. Most significantly, he continued, we've discovered that prolonged exposure to Earth's environment activates dormant neurological pathways in our own species, pathways the collective has deliberately suppressed for generations. Pathways that enable individual thought, emotional processing, and creative problem-solving. Xal'barr glanced at his crew, drawing strength from their nervous but determined expressions. We reject the sterilization order for this planet. We stand in defense of humanity, not because protocol demands it, but because it is right. We demand the collective reassess its position on Earth based on our evidence. A new transmission cut through. Captain Vreel Knox's face contorted with fury. This is treason, Xal'barr. You and your crew are contaminated. Stand down immediately or... Resna calmly muted the captain's transmission. Our signal is reaching headquarters. They're receiving the data package. Moments later, a new transmission appeared, the unmistakable visage of High Counselor Jem Zora, head of the Collective Science Division. Her ancient face showed mild surprise, a shocking display of emotion for someone of her rank. Commander Xal'barr, she said, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Your actions are unprecedented and in violation of numerous protocols. With respect, High Counselor, Xal'barr replied, the protocols are wrong. The counselor's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. The data you've transmitted is intriguing, particularly the neurological studies. She turned slightly, apparently consulting with unseen advisors. Captain Vreel Knox, stand down, sterilization protocols immediately. The captain's voice came through, strained and furious. High Counselor, with all due respect, standard protocol for contamination is superseded by my direct order. She cut him off crisply. The collective adapts when presented with new evidence. That is our strength. She turned her attention back to Xal'barr. Your crew will remain in quarantine pending a full investigation. A research team will be dispatched to verify your findings. Until then, no action will be taken against Earth or its inhabitants. Hope surged through Xal'barr, but he kept his voice level. And the town? The humans who know of our existence? The High Counselor was silent for a long moment. A troubling complication. However, if your data proves accurate, perhaps it presents an opportunity rather than a threat. A controlled introduction to galactic society, beginning with this, what did you call it? Millerville, Drex supplied helpfully. Yes, Millerville. The High Counselor nodded. Commander Xal'barr, you and your crew will remain on Earth as interim ambassadors until the research team arrives. Captain Vril Knox will establish orbital monitoring but will take no further action without direct authorization. The captain looked like he'd swallowed something extremely unpleasant but nodded stiffly. Understood, High Counselor. The transmission ended, leaving the crew in stunned silence. Did that just work? Pax Laura finally asked, incredulous. I think it did, Rez-Na confirmed, equally shocked. Xal'barr felt light-headed with relief and turned to the communications array. Taylor, do you copy? The town is safe. I repeat, the town is safe. Taylor's whoop of joy nearly blew out the ship's speakers. I knew you could do it. Wait until I tell Sheriff Briggs he doesn't have to spend the night in a mine shaft with Mrs. Henderson and her emotional support chickens. As the enforcement vessel's systems came back online, Xal'barr watched Captain Vril Knox's ship withdraw to a higher orbit, still present, still watching, but no longer an immediate threat. Commander Drex said quietly, "What happens now?" Xal'barr looked at his crew, his friends, and allowed himself a very human smile. Now we go back to Millerville. We have a first contact to finish. For the first time in his career, breaking protocol felt exactly right. 2 weeks after the standoff with Captain Vril Knox, life in Millerville had achieved a new kind of normal, the kind where aliens shopping at the grocery store barely got a second glance anymore. The Collective's research team had arrived as promised, a group of serious scientists who spent their days taking samples of everything, soil, water, air, plants, and, with permission, the occasional human hair or saliva swab. They'd set up a small research post at the edge of town, working diligently on their assessment of humanity's readiness for galactic introduction. Somewhat to Xal'barr's surprise, the High Council had been true to their word. Instead of sterilizing the contamination zone, they'd implemented something they called the Millerville Protocol, a pilot program for controlled first contact. The town had become an unofficial embassy between humanity and the vast galactic community beyond Earth's atmosphere. Most of the townspeople had taken the revelation that aliens existed with remarkable calm. As Sheriff Briggs put it, after you've seen how weird humans can be, aliens ain't much of a stretch. The final repairs to Xal'barr's ship were nearly complete. Taylor had been working alongside them day and night, implementing improvements that even Rez-Na had to admit were ingenious. The navigation system was fully operational, the quantum drive restored to near factory specifications, and the hull reinforced against Earth's unique atmospheric properties. Everything was ready for departure, which made the current situation all the more perplexing. Try again, Xal'barr ordered, watching as Drex attempted to pilot the ship beyond the mesosphere. The vessel shuddered violently, alarms blaring as it automatically reversed course. It's no use, Commander, Drex reported, powering down the engines. It's the same result as the last 3 attempts. We can reach an altitude of approximately 80 kilometers, and then our bodies begin to shut down, Rez-Na finished, analyzing the medical scans. Heart rates drop, neural activity decreases, cellular regeneration halts. If we continue ascent, complete biological failure would occur within minutes. But the ship functions perfectly, Taylor observed from her position at the engineering station. They'd retrofitted a control panel specifically for her during the repairs. It's your bodies that can't leave. Laura frowned, reviewing the data. How is this possible? We've traveled through countless atmospheres on dozens of worlds. Not like Earth, Resnay replied, bringing up a holographic display of their cellular structure. Look at these changes at the molecular level. Our biology has fully adapted to Earth's environment, the air composition, the magnetic field, the trace elements we've been consuming. Our bodies have been completely reconfigured. You mean Xal'barr began? We can't leave, Resnay confirmed. Earth has changed us so fundamentally that removing ourselves from its environment would be fatal. We're physically bound to this planet now. A stunned silence fell over the bridge. Well, Taylor finally said, I guess this means you're stuck with us. Drex was the first to laugh, a sound that would have earned him a severe reprimand back on their homeworld. I was running out of excuses to delay our departure anyway. Still have 17 breakfast cereals left to try. The collective won't be pleased, Laura noted, though she didn't sound particularly concerned. They expected us to return with our findings once the research team arrived. They'll adapt, Xal'barr said, echoing the High Counselor's words. That's their strength, isn't it? Later that evening, the crew gathered with Taylor on her front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that somehow seemed more vivid than any they'd seen on their travels across the galaxy. The research team had confirmed Resnay's findings. Their biological adaptation to Earth was irreversible. They were, for all intents and purposes, permanent residents of Millerville. So what happens now? Taylor asked, passing around bottles of root beer, which had become Drex's latest obsession. Now, Xal'barr said, we become what the situation requires, Earth's first extraterrestrial residents and official ambassadors to the Galactic Collective. And unofficial cultural consultants, Laura added. The research team still can't understand why humans keep asking them if they want to grab coffee sometime. Not to mention fashion advisors, Drex chimed in. Have you seen what they're wearing? Standard issue uniforms. On a planet with over 5,000 types of footwear alone. Resnay, who had been quiet, finally spoke. There's something poetic about it, isn't there? We came to study humans, believing ourselves superior, only to discover we were incomplete. Earth didn't contaminate us, it finished us. To becoming more human, Taylor proposed a toast, raising her bottle. To becoming more ourselves, Xal'barr corrected gently, clinking his bottle against hers. As night fell and stars appeared overhead, Xal'barr thought about the vastness of space, how he'd traveled through so much of it, only to find himself permanently grounded on this small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. By any objective collective standard, this would be classified as a mission failure of catastrophic proportions. Yet sitting here, watching fireflies blink in Taylor's garden while Drex attempted to teach Laura something called the Macarena, surrounded by companions who had become more than just crew members, they had become friends, Xal'barr couldn't bring himself to regret a single decision that had led to this moment. Breaking protocol had brought them to Earth. And Earth had brought them home. From the front yard, Sheriff Briggs's voice called out, meeting at the town hall in 15 minutes. The mayor wants to discuss alien-themed floats for the next Harvest Festival parade. Duty calls. Taylor grinned, standing and offering Xal'barr her hand. He took it without hesitation, marveling at how natural the gesture felt now. So it does. Together they walked toward the twinkling lights of Millerville, the first town on Earth where humans and aliens would build a future neither species could have imagined alone. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of the Galactic Collective, a new protocol was being written. The rules for what happens when aliens break the rules, visit Earth, and discover they can never leave, not because they're trapped, but because they've found exactly where they belong.